All right. Good afternoon. As Amber said, I'm Kellie Herbert. My son is Jackson Herbert. He is 6 years, 11 months old, and we live just outside of Denver, Colorado. So I thought about how do I squeeze 6 years of having this diagnosis and what a day in the life looks like into 10 minutes. So I'll do my best, but it really goes back to a Thursday morning in May of 2017. Jackson was 4 months old, and I was cooking breakfast in the kitchen, and I noticed that he balled up his fist and tapped it to his chin. Just as I glanced over, and that struck me as odd. And so I grabbed my husband and I said, look at this. He's tapping his chin. And he said, well, babies do weird things. And I said, but Tyler, our older son, I said, Tyler didn't do that. And he said, well, all babies are different. And so it would be the first of many times that someone would, and he didn't do it intentionally, but dismiss what my mom gut told me that something wasn't right. And so I let that go for a couple of months, but I watched him over and over, hundreds of times a day, either ball his fist up and hit his chin, or he would make this okay symbol and he would touch his fingers to his chin all day long. Instead of playing with toys, instead of grabbing and exploring his feet, that would be my first indication of his SLC 6A1 diagnosis that would come in the future. Let's see if we can. So that was it. Just very quick. Most people would have thought I was crazy. My own husband thought I was crazy. But it was in that moment that I knew something wasn't right. In the years since that day, I can now look back and realize it was in that moment that my family would be thrust into the depths of darkness on a journey that we didn't ask for. But before I get there, I want to introduce my family to you. So this is my husband, Glenn, my older son, Tyler, and then, of course, Jackson. Jackson, as you can tell by his smile, loves the park. He loves riding on trains at the mall. He has the most beautiful big brown eyes you might have ever seen, and he has a belly laugh that when he gets going is infectious and will get anyone in the room laughing. He is truly, truly a joy when he's regulated. Unfortunately, with Jackson, he would start to have many, many developmental disabilities show up. This is his first broken leg just before the age of 2. This is the bed that we fought through 10 rounds of appeals with insurance to put him in at night to keep him safe, to prevent him from eloping, to prevent him from falling and breaking his leg again, which actually did happen, and then they approved the bed. We did everything that we could to keep him safe. Every time we would fix one problem, it was like plugging a boat that had multiple leaks in it. So every time we'd plug one leak, a leak would spring somewhere else. The picture to the far left is a picture of Jackson's ear. That's what we would wake up to in the morning because Jackson at this point was hitting himself in the head over 3,000 times a day. He would hit himself constantly, and even without even understanding that he was doing it, it just became a repetitive motion that he could not stop from doing, over and over and over. At night, we didn't have a way to stop him. We tried holding him in his sleep, but eventually we would be so tired that we would fall asleep too, and then we would wake up to him hitting himself in the head while we were holding him. Nothing we did would work. His chin, that would be a subsequent wound that would come after his school attached his helmet to his head wrong. And because he has limited communication at that time, he kept trying to pull at it to let them know that something was hurting his chin, but they thought he was being bad and trying to take his helmet off. So they kept holding his hands behind his back. All the while, the strap was rubbing his chin raw, causing a staph infection, which led to this wound and 7 months of wound care with wound packs that had to be changed 3 times a day because he couldn't communicate that something was wrong. The third picture is a picture of what his head looked like for 18 months. Between the wound care on his ears and the wound care on his chin, Jackson was not able to have his head unwrapped and interact with the world without looking like a mummy all of the time. It actually worked out for a pretty good Halloween costume last year, though. So there is a light in every story. And then he would constantly hit himself in the head so much that he would cause his own knuckles to burst open and his hands to bleed. This was a picture of us on an airplane where he started bleeding uncontrollably, so we had to use his favorite blankie as sort of a tourniquet to slow the bleeding. So I took him to doctor after doctor, brilliant professionals, and they all said, "You're doing your best, keep it up, but we don't have any answers for you. We don't know what to do. We tried medications, we tried therapies." This is the picture on the left. Jackson wears arm braces to sleep at night because even though we are now a year past his ear issues, we still can't stop him from involuntarily hitting himself in the head at night. So for almost 2 years now, Jackson has slept with his arms unable to bend at night. So if his nose itches, or if he needs to scratch his head, or if he's trying to reach for his blanket, the only thing he can do is roll around and try to scoot down far enough to reach whatever it is he's trying to reach, or rub his face in his bed or on his pillow. When we got Jackson to stop hitting himself in the head, when we extincted that behavior, by that time the chin wound was so pervasive that he started hitting his chin on his shoulder because he had lost the sensation to hit his head or to tap his chin, and that caused muscle damage in his shoulder area that we had to then seek subsequent treatment for. So eventually, in order to deal with all of that, I started making clothing with large pieces of foam sewn into the shoulder so that he couldn't tap. The helmet that you see in the picture is a helmet that I fabricated. I got a lot of compliments at the hospitals for that. So I made a helmet that he was no longer able to hit his temples or his ears or the top of his head because he has been hospitalized for infections and serious injuries related to his continuous self-injurious behaviors. Now, that's just the behaviors, but for Jackson, he also requires one-to-one support and supervision 24 hours a day. As you see, we have to zip him in a bed at night, but when he's not in bed, we have to administer all medications, we have to dress him, we have to give him a diaper, we have to put him in a Richten activity chair, which is essentially a large high chair for a large person. We have to feed him his meals. He doesn't yet have the fine motor skills to consistently feed himself with utensils. We have to give him bits and pieces of food in smaller amounts because he'll overstuff his face and then it's a choking hazard. We have to help him in and out of the car. He is still in a car seat, a 5-point harness. We have to make sure that all of the doors are locked and that we have chains up high where he can't reach them so that he does not elope. We have video cameras all over our house tracking his progress and his activity to ensure that in the case that he is injured, which happens frequently, we have proof to show CPS, who has investigated us previously, that we are not at fault for these accidents, that these are SLC-driven accidents and behavior. He's not aware of his body and space and time, and we're doing our best that we can as parents. Imagine living like that every single day, having to prove that you're doing your very best for your child. So each time we plug these holes, something new continues to come up. So Jackson stopped hitting himself in the head. He stopped tapping his chin, but then Jackson started biting his wrists and biting his knees and biting his feet. And if you meet Jackson, he's got calluses all over his body where he can't control himself. So this is what Jackson looks like at any given time. If you were a medical professional that were to see him for any clinic visit, you're going to see scars and scabs and calluses that we do everything we can to prevent. I wish that was it, though. That's how it impacts Jackson directly, but it actually impacts the entire family. So I've lost count of the number of times that we've been injured by Jackson. I know at one point I did a count as I was sharing with a behavioral study that I had been injured over 300 times, serious enough to require medical attention. The picture that you see of me on the left is a picture where Jackson, out of nowhere, seemed to be happy, walked over, unplugged his sound machine, and threw it at my head before I could even raise my hands. That was actually what I would consider a minor injury. I treated that one at home. And I did a pretty good job. There's no scar there. My son Tyler, he's 12, is often grabbed at, hit, elbowed, kicked. My husband is scratched and bitten. We basically live in a war zone many of the days. So I made it my mission to make sure that my son didn't get hurt anymore, that I would do whatever it took as a mother to not see Jackson hurt himself or to not see Tyler be hurt by Jackson's involuntary behavior. And so putting myself in the firing line meant that I was going to be injured over and over and over. Some of the pictures are hard to see, but lots of scratches on the face and the neck. Plenty of cuts in the mouth where he's reached in and cut my gums. Lots of trips to the dentist. Last summer, I sustained 2 different concussions so serious that I had to be followed by neurology for 6 months. One of the concussions required me to be treated in the hospital. I had post-concussion symptoms for more than 6 months, and some of which they said were potentially permanent. I don't think they are. I think I'm doing okay today. But then I was referred to adult PT and OT to try and help with some of my symptoms. This was all just trying to keep my kids safe. I've sustained injuries to my limbs. Those are bite marks that you see in various different places on my body. And I wish I could say these were all different angles and different progressions of the same bite, but they're not. These are all different, separate incidents. Couple of pictures of scratches and other bruises. And I know this is really, really heavy. The reason I share all of this is because most of what we do is look at EEGs and look at clinical significance for how drugs improve an EEG. Well, Jackson doesn't show typical seizures on an EEG like several of our SLC patients. But what I can tell you is there's a wonderful doctor here in this room, thank you, Dr. Goodspeed, who recommended amantadine to Jackson. She said, I don't know, it's not necessarily an autism drug, but it could help him, and I've seen success in other patients. We didn't test it with an EEG, or we didn't do specific blood work. There were no specific data points that were the gold standard for the industry. But what I can tell you is that he had an 83% reduction in behaviors, aggressive behaviors, towards me. That I can track. His school tracks his behaviors on a daily basis. He goes to a school for autistic children, so they're constantly with a clicker tracking his aggressive behaviors. He went from 1,500 aggressive behaviors a day to 50 behaviors a day on the combination of risperidone and amantadine. That's a 93% reduction in aggressive behaviors towards himself and towards others. I don't need an EEG to tell me that. When he started Ravicti, at that time, the trial didn't have space for Jackson, so I sought to get Ravicti on my own. With the help of Dr. Demarest, I was able to get that approved through my insurance company, and Jackson was able to gain over 200 words on his assistive communication device. That, as you can imagine, dramatically reduced his frustration and his aggression towards himself and others. I could write a medical book on specific data points not related to things like EEGs, where there are meaningful endpoints that are able to be used in clinical trials and many other applications that aren't used in traditional settings today. This room is full of brilliant people. And I'm just asking that you continue to think about children like Jackson who don't fit the stereotypical molds for a study, for a clinical trial, for trying out a new drug, because you here are the reason that we have hope for a better day. Thank you.